I've been in the iGaming space for around 15 years. If you want to be in the Brazilian market, Brazil prohibits crypto. Player versus player games opens a lot of scope for money laundering, for example. Don't even want users and are just set up solely as a money laundering venture.
Oh,
right?
wow, really?
The cost of money laundering has gone up from about 20 to 55% in 2025.
Powered by my gaming license.
Hello and welcome back to My Gaming License podcast. We are here in Barcelona and we just had 3 amazing days at ICE Barcelona. And we are here now with Kris from Sumsub. And we're going to go through a lot of interesting topics on compliance, KYC, and the trending topics in the compliance and regulatory space as well. So we're very excited to have Kris here. Thank you, Kris, for accepting our invitation to be here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you again, Kris, from the My Gaming License part as well. And to start the podcast, I would ask you to tell a little bit about yourself, your journey, your experience.
Absolutely. So I've been in the iGaming space for around 15 years, I think, starting off playing poker in my early 20s to then realizing that I should probably get a proper job. I started working at PokerStars.
A lot of people actually started this way, started as a poker player and then tried to explore what's behind this whole industry, like who's and how's working. I know a lot of people that I spoke to, they were all also started as a poker player and then
really
yeah.
I think that now times have changed, but 15 years ago I think you got to the point as a poker player where you started realizing that you probably couldn't put that on your CV, and after 2.5 years or so you were worried that question might come up in an interview or people might judge you off the back of that, because it still had that reputation of being gambling at the time, whereas poker, as you and I know, is yes, of course, it's gambling, but it's gambling in a very different way to spending hours at the roulette table with a glass of whiskey in your hand. So it was a slightly different time in that sense. Like I said, decided to get a proper job. Worked at PokerStars for nearly 9 years. Then I joined Entain shortly after that, which took me to the south of Spain, since they're based in Gibraltar, are based in Gibraltar. Then I did some consulting for a few smaller operators. Did some work in the skin gambling space, which was certainly an eye-opener in many, many ways. Not just in terms of innovation and marketing, but also just looking at gaming from a different perspective and looking at different demographics. In particular, I think Gen Z and what their expectations are. It's scary to think, but Gen Z is now 28 years old, I want to say, 28, 29.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's scary. I think also as a gamer myself, I took a lot of inspiration is probably the wrong word, but certainly I was influenced by the way that a lot of the skin gambling operators would incorporate gaming elements into their ecosystems.
Okay, so you have experience from so many different perspectives, like as you said, from starting from the poker stars, then we go into the social part of the industry, and right now we're seeing that different, as you told, that Gen Z, what interested the Gen Z, and we see that the interest is growing more to the games like Crash, Plinko. And I'm curious that they are also moving from gray markets to the regulated markets. And I'm just curious how do you think, are the regulators ready for the games look like video games, not as a traditional slots?
Yeah.
1, and 2, how to make sure that these games stay as they are without changing a lot, but still ensuring that they are safe?
Yeah, that's a very deep question, I think.
To start off with.
Yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think working with regulators in this capacity is also a big part of what I'm doing now at Sumsub, because obviously the verification and compliance comes first, which isn't always necessarily compatible with the next gen games that you're mentioning. There are some regulations which would directly prohibit something that targets what's considered to be a younger audience, even though that younger audience, like we said, is now in their mid to late 20s, but those expectations are still there from them being younger. So that's another way of saying, I think games like Hilo and Plinko and Dice, for example, they're games which are innovative. They're games that you don't really, or Crash Variations, for example, as well. They're games which you don't see as much on the more traditional platforms, right? The more mainstream platforms, let's say. And I think there are some examples, there are some cases of where versions of Crash have been implemented. JetX, I think, might be a good example of that. And they haven't necessarily been as successful as they are on sites such as Stake.com or Duelbits or Roobet, or sites which are known.
Why do you think so?
For that, I think it's partly because there's a lack of understanding just in terms of the value that those games have, the appeal that those games have. And I think it's also just because I think younger, again, I talk a lot about Gen Z because I think there's a big cultural difference between Gen Z and between millennials. And I think that a lot of them would have grown up in their early 20s, and they wouldn't necessarily want to play on the same website as their Uncle Bob.
The same slots.
Who talks about that ACCA that he won last Saturday on the horses. It's just not part of that younger generation gaming type culture. So I think that the perception of those sites, you look at that, and then you look at something such as, like we mentioned before, such as Stake and the way that they market and they brand, for example, it's very, very different, and it's the appeal is different. So I think that introducing a next-gen game on a traditional site requires more than just, hey, we've dropped this feature, it's there if you want it. I think it requires a small shift in brand, not branding, but maybe in marketing, to build
to appeal to these younger generations.
Absolutely, just building a narrative that becomes more appealing to them. Your question was also in regards to regulation. And I think that we see that a lot of regulators, that they're very good at regulating the licensed operators, right? But it's almost like there's just very little awareness of the operators who aren't regionally licensed, who aren't regulated, who are operating in regions where, in the grey markets, let's say. So I think that there needs to be the appetite, first of all, to understand the very nuances that we were just discussing in regards to age demographics and branding. And then beyond that, the technical understanding of the differences of the games, for example. We see regulation in places like Germany, which limits the amount of time between slot spins, for example. You then introduce something like Plinko, where you're dropping 30 balls over the course of 40 seconds with higher stakes, then it opens it opens a regulatory can of worms, in a sense, right? It's an entirely new dynamic. Traditionally, we're used to slots, we're used to live casino, and we're used to table games. And these are the three sub-verticals of casino. And I think as soon as you start introducing these next-gen games, they're very different. The way that you play them is very different. And it's almost misleading in the sense of, as a regulator, if you're not part of this world, of this ecosystem, maybe if you don't have that product experience, you might look at dice and think of the traditional casino dice game, whereas obviously when you're playing it on a platform such as Stake, for example, it's much more about, I'm going to say, defining your own algorithm in terms of when you spin, how frequently you spin, rather than just throwing dice. It's not a fun animation. It's
how does it actually work for our audience as well, who might not be aware of the next gen games? If you could give us a bit more introduction as to how these games work. You can take Dice as an example, or Plinko, or any others. Just for
So I'd say it's a version of the traditional games, but on steroids, right? So
that's why regulation is big.
Because of, I guess, social media and all this stuff.
Yeah, very, very likely. I think that all you have to do is go on YouTube and Google Dice game, for example, or Dice Casino game, and you'll see how it works. So on Plinko, for example, you'll define what your risk appetite is. You'll define what you want to stake, and then you'll just drop ball after ball after ball after ball, or you'll automate it. So it's very much a traditional game, but it's being it's just what's the word? It's been put on steroids, basically. I don't think there's a better way of describing that. And a lot of these games are just fun, right? And a little bit more interactive and a little bit more engaging. And I think, I don't want to, I mean, I'm certainly not qualified to go into the psychology of attention spans and engagement rates and younger people versus older people, but I just think that there has been, or there was a few years ago, a gap in the market for making casinos just a bit more fun. And I think that this has certainly plugged that gap.
Regulators don't send push notifications, but we do. We collect all global updates directly from the source. Join the MGL Telegram news channel for the news that actually matters to your business.
Do you think that casinos that work in the gray market, they might want to go to the regulated ones, but there is a, as you said, gap in the regulations, so they can't do it right now, or it's not what it is right now?
I think it depends very much on the regulation. I'd say at a very basic level, for example, and I don't doubt that we'll talk about this more a bit later on, but I think if you look at just a crypto casino, for example, right, the fact that if you want to be in the Brazilian market, Brazil prohibits crypto. So that's a very basic example of something that could be considered fairly pioneering, but you can't do. Another example might be
UK, maybe.
I think the UK is very strict in this case, right? Just if you look at something around the portrayal of what could be perceived to be cartoon characters, for example, and you compare that to something like Roulette, right? There's just a clash there immediately as soon as you even look at the branding. So there's a conflict there. I think in regards to innovation of features, for example, which you mentioned, one thing that we're seeing emerge is player versus player games. And this is something which I think opens a lot of scope for money laundering, for example. And just responsible gambling in general. I think there are lots of unknowns when you look at player versus player. Obviously, poker is the exception to this, right? Poker, which is very much player versus player, but that's been around for a long time. We're very, I think the regulation of poker at a responsible gambling and fraud level is very mature. Whereas something like rock, paper, scissors is not, or coin flip is not mature.
Have you ever thought, like, should poker be separated into the whole gambling landscape? Because obviously it's player versus player. It's not player versus an algorithm in essence, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is already fairly isolated, right? It follows very much its own set of rules, way that you identify fraud, whether it's fraud at the level of a violation, violating the terms of service, or whether it's fraud at a governmental level with something like money laundering. I think there's the checks that are in place are very much tailored to the poker environment. The fraud teams that they set up, the investigation teams, for example. So I think it's already quite mature, and I already see it as being separate from a lot of the others. Bingo is the other example, right? Bingo is much lower risk and very difficult to manipulate, if not impossible, and it's much lower stakes, obviously, but that kind of sits in its own vertical as well.
And before we move on to the next one, you mentioned something about regulators and Gen Z and the type of games that they like. So what I was also thinking is, from regulators' perspective, is it the lack of willingness to appeal to these younger audiences, or is it just because they just want to tick the box and that's it?
At the regulatory level, I think it's probably more of a lack of. I mean, well, maybe not. I don't think it's a lack of willingness as much as it's a lack of resource and a lack of knowledge. In a lot of cases, there are. I mean, there's a large scale in terms of regulators who genuinely care for the players or the user's well-being and want what's best for the user, to those who just feel as though they're cashing in on a popular industry and pastime. I'd like to think that most of the ones that I've come across genuinely have the player's best interests at heart.
Okay.
That's obviously the same with operators as well, right? There are some who take the route of, let's try and make the responsible gambling section, let's put it somewhere deep down in the settings. And there are others who kind of go, we really want to make sure that we've got the player's best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Let's put this somewhere very relevant so that it's easily accessible. And I think ultimately though, with regulators, I think that there is, I mean, even at the operator level, we've been at ICE for the last few days, we've attended other conferences. It's kind of shocking how you can speak with very senior people and you can talk about some innovative features or the next gen games that we've been discussing, and you'll just get a blank stare back at you, right? There's just this huge lack of understanding. And this is I think we see this in every industry. I think that lots of companies are very good at what they do. They make lots of money doing what they do, and something new comes along and it's almost a challenge, right? It's almost that they feel intimidated by what's new, and especially when you're turning over as much money as the large operators still are. It's not something that you really need to worry about. So if we see that at the operator level, if you talk to an operator about player versus player games and they look at you like you're an alien, then at the regulator level, I mean, it's even there's even less knowledge there, even less understanding, I think. So if you, again, so I don't think it's necessarily a lack of willingness or enthusiasm. It's just a lack of understanding. And sorry, just one more thing. There are so many layers to it as well that it is daunting. And it's one of those things where when you start peeling back the first layer, it's one of those things where the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn in this sense.
It's true.
And, you know, I've been in the industry for 15 years and worked across a number of different types of operators. And I still feel like I'm only peeling back the first couple of layers. And also, you know, there's so much money in the industry that the top talent, I think, is going to be snapped up by the operators before those people are brought on board to the regulators.
Right. And I think I feel that industry is changing much faster. I mean, like, it takes time for the regulations to change, but the industry is changing on a different pace. So it might be that regulators they're doing everything in order to be on the, go with all the changes as an industry, but it takes time for them to change everything. I mean,
yeah, of course, and I think that's something we see at a regulatory level beyond just iGaming, right? It's not just an iGaming thing. So, I completely agree, and it's things. I mean, this is without even bringing AI into the conversation. Right? I think it's going to progress so much faster in that sense as well. I mean, at Sumsub, or in the case of iGaming, I work with operators and different levels of willingness, right? We're always there to work with regulators in saying, look, these are the trends, this is the data we see, this is what's happening, this is where the industry is moving, this is where most of the fraud occurs. And there are just different appetites. Some of them lap it up, others kind of don't get back to me.
So talking of the fraud and trends, we see that Sumsub has got a best KYC solution in the Middle East region, right? Recently.
Yes, absolutely.
So
won a number of awards as well. Sigma KYC Provider of the Year last year. So
congratulations for that.
Yes.
And so we happen to also think about what are the fraud trends that you're seeing that regulators are avoiding because of lack of knowledge or you know.
I'm trying to think. There are so many answers to this. I'm thinking, should I lead with AI or should I lead with money laundering? Which shall we go for first?
Yeah, I mean, the most important one that you see.
Okay, I mean,
because we've got something else for AI as well.
Right.
Okay, all right, let's go with money laundering then. So what we've noticed is money laundering is becoming more expensive using traditional means. Right? Okay. So banking, right? For example, we've seen the scandals such as Mexico with HSBC, for example, right? Some figures suggest that the cost of money laundering has gone up from about roughly low 20% in around 2019, 2020 to 40 to 55% in 2025. So it's becoming increasingly expensive.
I thought it was something like 2 or 5.
Yeah, 5%, something like this for me as well.
Yeah.
No, much higher than that.
Okay.
And 20% was a heyday of money laundering, which is a
wow.
horrible way to put it. But yeah, so it's becoming more expensive. So I think that iGaming almost becomes the alternative for banking. Now, obviously, within regulated markets and regulated operators, it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that we do and operators do is transaction monitoring. We analyze bets, we analyze account activity, so we can identify trends which are reflective of money laundering.
Yeah.
However, that's obviously different in an environment where you're not regulated, where you're not volunteering the data that's required to make those checks. And obviously within, and this isn't to vilify any one particular
Of course.
company in this case, but we see an entire range, just in the same way that a moment ago I spoke about responsible gambling and the way that operators go about providing responsible gambling, whether it's easy to access or not. There's obviously scales in the grey market world as well, right? You have operators who are very reputable, they care about their brand, they care about their users. And at the other end, you have the operators who don't even want users and are just set up solely as a money laundering venture.
Oh,
right?
wow, really?
Absolutely, yeah. So
Even so, from the beginning of their operation, they are...
the sole purpose is to just launder funds. And these are the ones who are flying under the radar, right? And you're in the industry, and if your reaction is, oh, wow, think about it at a regulatory level. That where the regulators are looking at their stable of nationally regulated operators and all of the others fly under the radar, this isn't even going to be on their agenda. In some cases, obviously not all. So I think that's a big threat. If we look at, obviously some markets are more concerning than others. I think Mexico is an interesting example. Currently, the division between land-based casinos and online is heavily in favor of land-based. Some figures suggest that it's about 80%. I think the last figures I read was revenue for land-based is approximately 11 billion in Mexico at the moment, whereas online it's about 2 billion. And then you look at the fact that the government's figures report that $51 billion was laundered in 2024. You look at the fact that the tech adoption rate is quite high, and it just feels like there's a time bomb there waiting to go off.
Wow.
So I think that's one of the biggest threats that's flying under the radar. And I think from our perspective at Sumsub, it's frustrating because the solution is there. This is something that's very easy to identify. It's something that can be traced very, very quickly. But if the regulators aren't at least and I'm making it sound easier than it is, but if they're not at least banning the unlicensed operators in their region, which again is much harder, is much easier said than done, then it becomes hard to actually identify it. But I think that's a very real risk. We're on the ground with $1,000 limits in some cases being flagged for money laundering, while we're letting companies set up for this sole purpose just fly under the radar and move millions and millions through their platforms.
I wanted to ask about also that we're talking about AI and also the KYC and all this stuff. It's all about everything is related to the EML and about responsible gambling and everything. And do you think that AI is right now helping to detect those actions, or is making easier to launder money? So
both. It's a double-edged sword, right? AI is becoming an arms race between the goodies and the baddies. So
it's about who wins the race in which level, I guess.
I don't think there's an end to the race. It's just ongoing all the time, right? I mean, I think I'd like to think the goodies are a step ahead. And they normally are, but it's always, there's always that next step. There's always the next scam, I suppose. I mean, we saw. What we're seeing at the moment is a very interesting trend. I think obviously we have the fraud. We have fraud at the or how should I put it? We have fraud at the syndicate level, and then we have fraud at the opportunistic level.
Yeah.
This is particularly relevant of bonus fraud, but just fraud in general is the same argument applies, the same logic applies rather. I think that what we've seen recently, and this was particularly relevant around, I could be mistaken, I think between May and July, when ChatGPT launched the imagery functionality, that we saw a peak in ID fraud around that time, verification fraud and things like this. However, it was a peak that came more from the opportunistic side of things, right? The opportunistic.
Right, yeah. There's an update, let's try and see if it goes through or not. Yeah.
Kind of, or even people thinking, I'm aware of, or somebody who might understand the basics of bonus abuse, or, and they would try and they'd see an opportunity there and they take advantage of it. Now, that was something that we could identify fairly easily at the time, but I think that the scary thought is when, or it's already happening, obviously, when the syndicate side of it starts adopting these practices, or adopting is the wrong word, when they start evolving these practices. That's who I think the real arms race is against. And we see, I mean, again, this is something that probably a lot of people don't know, but the scale of fraud, not just within iGaming and bonus abuse, but romance scams as well. I mean, there are small complexes which are essentially like small cities in parts of East Asia, which are just set up for the sole purpose of carrying out this fraud.
I watched a video about this. It's so scary, actually.
Absolutely.
Like, people are just calling on behalf of others and then pretending to be their relatives, friends, and laundering the money.
I mean, everything you can think of it goes beyond that. Within bonus abuse as well. I mean, one great thing that we do at Sumsub is when we carry out verification. We're also checking what's in the background so that we can check the consistencies in terms of what's behind the person taking the photo. So if there is a case of a syndicate where they're just creating multiple accounts for nefarious objectives, then we can identify that as well. But and some of the times as well, the people on the ground actually carrying out the fraud are victims themselves. There are cases where, in the case of one particular organization that carried out romance scams, what is it called? Pig butchering scams, I think. They would they'd advertise jobs. I think it was in Thailand.
It was Cambodia, Laos, so something near the Thailand.
But they would list the job as being in Thailand.
Yes.
They would advertise in India and North African countries. They'd attract genuinely talented people. Then they would say they were going to pick them up from the airport and take them to the office. They would take them over the border to a neighboring territory, sometimes at gunpoint. And then essentially just force them to carry out these scams.
16 hours a day, 20 hours a day.
Very likely, So, often these scammers can be victims themselves as well, which is another scary thought.
There's so many layers to it. I mean, I think there's no end to when we kind of try to uncover these layers. But going back to the AI, we're also curious, like how Sumsub has implemented AI in its product development, right? Or because there's so many use cases now, a lot of giants are also making use of AI to speed up the development process as well as detect some things early on. So how's Sumsub treating AI or using AI?
Well, it means that we can essentially cover a lot more ground in a lot less time with a lot more accuracy and confidence, right? So on one hand, it's being developed to identify the fraud cases of AI that we are receiving, we see. So we're using AI.
So there is some features already set up to kind of...
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a constant arms race. So in the same way...
Do you have like an AI team?
Yes.
Okay.
Pavel is our head of AI. In the same way that we would carry out deep pixel analysis, for example, to identify Photoshop documents.
We're
doing the same with AI. Obviously at a much more advanced level. We're also using AI to identify trends, identify betting habits, analyzing sessions. Also at a betting analysis level, if you think about, I'll just pick a random use case. Let's say that a user is adopting a betting system, for example. The AI will already have learned what that betting system looks like, and it would be able to flag it much easier than a human creating rules. So if somebody is, let's say, adopting a martingale system, for example, you would either need, previously you would have need to have set up specific rules to identify the betting patterns that might flag that, and there could be a number of false positives there. AI would already have learned that, and it would continue learning to refine the confidence rating to identify it with even more accuracy in future. And then of course we apply that not just to betting patterns, but to money laundering, to transaction monitoring, to ID, to verification. So yeah, it makes everything. It streamlines what we previously had to do either manually or automate ourselves.
That's really good.
Yeah, I will just I think go back again to your experience. I would say hear more about as a player right now. You said like you started as a poker player, and you know lots about the different types of games. So do you think that sometimes when entering the casino and wanting to play, you see the responsible gambling feature and say it's more frustrating than it should be, and you get upset about this, or you said like it's stopping the entertainment feature or being interesting?
Absolutely not, actually. No,
This is good.
No, I think so. If I'm talking about,
you rather feel like this is in my hands, this is my responsibility, and it's up to me to kind of choose when I want to.
also no.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
no. Yeah,
Tell us.
controversial. So if I look back at my own experience, I don't think, at least if you're playing live and you walk into a brick and mortar casino, to a land-based casino, you very rarely does it go beyond setting a deposit limit, which you can change anyway, and seeing the leaflet on the counter that tells you what the symptoms are of having a gambling problem. Bear in mind, I'm just speaking from the poker perspective. I very rarely actually.
I'm curious now. I haven't been to a lot of land-based myself. Even when I go, probably I do roulette because it's something easier, just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
So please, how does it work when it comes to land-based and responsible gaming? Is there some kind of setup there?
From a responsible
Because you
gambling-
touched on it, I'm now curious.
From a responsible gambling perspective, typically you would register, you would have your photograph taken.
Yeah.
When you buy chips, if it's your first time, you typically set a limit on how much you can withdraw.
Right.
You can change that when you want to. And I mean, I don't really have an addictive personality.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the staff are also trained to identify signs of problem gambling, and I'm sure if they see that, they'll probably step in and have a word. And they make sure that the information is available as well to you so that you can identify it if you do have a problem. There'll typically be some sort of a leaflet or a pamphlet that says if you find yourself chasing your losses, if you ever borrow money to gamble, if you ever missed a financial commitment because of gambling, then you might have an issue, right? So this information is readily available. If I answer your question from the perspective
Of a player.
of online, I was going to say.
Yes, online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we see the same template, and a lot of regions who regulate will tend to copy the same template. We see a stricter template in places like Germany and the UK and Spain, and we see a slightly more relaxed template in regions which have regulated more recently, who are still evolving it.
Netherlands.
Sorry?
Netherlands.
Yeah, maybe. I was thinking more South American regions.
Oh,
right?
okay.
Or Mexico, places like this. So, and typically, I don't think it is too invasive at all. Actually, it feels very much like it's there if you want to use it, but it's not in your face. Now, I definitely believe there are much better, maybe not much better ways. I think what we have is good. It's useful for a user if they find themselves frustrated because they've lost more than they were willing to or more than they could afford. They have those features there to assist them.
But in those moments,
In those moments,
I'm trying to think from that
specific player perspective,
Yeah.
I might not want to utilize those tools. I might want to win what I lost, right? Usually that's a trap.
You shouldn't want to win what you lose. If you're chasing your losses, that is a sign of problem gambling. But I think a lot of the tools are used in a moment of frustration, right? When you think, I lost control here, I don't want to be in a position where I lose control again, so I'm going to make sure that I'm trying to think of a way of explaining it that puts you in the mindset of the player. I'm going to make sure that I'm unable to gamble for a month just until I figure out if this is definitely something I enjoy or if it's something that I'm addicted to.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I'm not that much of a player from the online gaming perspective, but I do play a lot of normal app games. I play a lot of cricket because that's something big in India. And there's this game where if I lose a few games, I want to win the same number of games or even more before I actually close the game.
Okay.
Each game takes about 7 to 10 minutes.
Sure.
And there were times where I was playing continuously for like 7 hours just because I wanted to kind of continue the winning streak to 10 games or 20 games without losing.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if it's similar in the iGaming player perspective, but it could be quite similar because the intention to win or continue or to recover what you win is probably what causes the problem gambling.
I just want to say I'm so happy that you don't gamble online.
Listen, I'm only going to say this because I'm the same as you in this sense. That seems more like an OCD thing than a problem gambling thing to me. It certainly feels more like an idiosyncrasy if you want to win 10 in a row. And I share that sentiment, so I'm kind of the same. Yes, I think it depends what your motivation is, right? It depends on how much you're staking. If you're staking, I don't know, if it's $1 per game and you've lost $23 and you want to win $10 in a row before you quit, then that's one thing. But if you've spent your rent money and you need to win that back, then that becomes a very different problem entirely. So in the case of the latter, somebody might think I'm going to self-exclude myself for however long to make sure that this doesn't happen again, to make sure that I don't put myself in a financially vulnerable position. So I think having those features there are useful for users in that sense. Now, the area where I feel we could be, or regulators could be doing more, because I think there's a big disconnect between what technology is capable of doing and what the regulators understand technology is capable of doing. So in this case, the template is very, very similar. We have status checks, we have self-exclusion, we have deposit limits, we have time limits, and it's kind of all the same. And it's there for the user to engage with themselves rather than it being more proactive and identifying worrying trends. But from a betting analysis perspective, from a transaction monitoring perspective, it's very feasible to identify where a user is chasing their losses, for example. Right? I think open banking obviously makes it, provides even more transparency. I understand at a regulatory level if some regulators feel as though that's going to be too invasive for users. However, even without open banking, there are still lots of ways that we can flag particular betting patterns that are representative of problem gambling. And that's just not something, I don't think there's any regulation in the world at the moment which actually implements this or even suggests this type of system. And that's completely possible. So I think I've kind of gone the opposite way, because your question was, is responsible gambling too invasive at the moment? And I think it could be even less invasive and more effective at the same time if regulators leverage the technology that's available to us.
Why are they not doing it?
Again, I think it's just a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. I think also they're very busy. It's a lack of resources. I think they've got an awful lot to do. I imagine, and I could be wrong, I'm not a politician, but I imagine it's probably, and I know this is the case in South Africa because I've spoken with some of the regulators there. I think it's difficult to justify.
But they do get a lot of tax revenue. I mean, if they want to, they can. like increase resources?
I think if there's a gap in the understanding at the regulatory level, that gap, I imagine, only expands when you go higher up in government and you need to justify what you're doing.
Is this something we can do to increase awareness in that group?
I'm trying to work with as many regulators as I can, right? I'm here representing Sumsub going, hey guys, look, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Just let me help you out. Let me communicate what can be done. Let me anonymously share data with you so that we can really work on creating frictionless solutions in your market. So they just have to, the ones who aren't doing just have to get back to me.
Actually, about this, does Sumsub work with crypto casinos?
Yeah, we work across the board. We operate throughout iGaming in its entirety.
People who use crypto casino, they want to be, say, more anonymous. That's why they're using crypto. Then how Sumsub kind of goes to the like golden and something in between, letting these people stay a little bit anonymous, but also being compliant.
Yeah. So I think that in the case of crypto, it's a selective anonymity.
Okay.
Struggle to say that word. It's a selective anonymity in the sense that I think there is more visibility into what happens on the blockchain, but at the same time, you are as anonymous or as visible as you want to be in this sense, right? So, and again, it depends on the regulation because crypto is regulated differently in different places. I think that, and it also depends on the platform.
Yeah.
You know, talking about that scale of being nefarious all the way up to responsible, and it depends very much on what you want to do. So, from our perspective, obviously, we're compliant, and that's our thing is making sure that we verify and that we're compliant at a regulatory level. So, at the same time, we verify that data is obviously very secure where we need to. In the case of operators who carry out zero verification and no KYC at all,
No KYC, yeah.
that's not a space that we really operate in.
Okay, yeah, that's what I think we were trying to ask initially because,
I mean, we do it at a
because it's increasingly becoming popular that crypto casinos are no KYC, taking down the route of no KYC approach.
Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, KYC is what we do, right? So
Yeah.
there's no But at the same time, obviously, we still work on KYB, on Know Your Business.
Right.
We work on transaction monitoring.
Right. Okay.
And in a lot of those cases, transaction monitoring almost becomes more important, and session analysis, for example, almost becomes more important because first of all, on one hand, users are going to feel as though they can get away with whatever fraud it may be or bonus abuse it may be, which puts more onus onto identifying those trends that could lead to bonus abuse or money laundering.
So they carry risk, they carry both.
Yeah.
If they're going down that route, they carry the risk as well for getting abused. Yeah. And the opposite as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously if it's a no KYC platform, then we don't operate in the KYC space there, but we do work on the transaction monitoring side of things to make sure that people aren't trying to take advantage of that anonymity for illicit purposes.
Interesting. And if we look at the blockchain casinos who run only on the blockchain, right? So there's crypto casinos which are crypto as a payment casinos, and then there's blockchain casinos which are totally on-chain, which are very few, still not that famous as much as crypto casinos are. What do you see in that space? Because blockchain has been for a while, since 2018, like more popular. So how do you see the blockchain casinos? Do you work with any of them? Do they help in some way in terms of like?
Again, that's really interesting because if we look at a blockchain casino specifically, there's even more transparency, right? There's more transparency.
Yeah, you can see everything.
Absolutely. It's just whether or not you can trace it back to a specific user or who the wallet belongs to, right? At that level. And then I think off-ramping becomes more tricky for those users, depending on how those bets have been carried out, on what the purposes have been. So, I mean, it's an entirely different world. It's strange because it's this pseudo-anonymous level that we're talking about, where everything instantly becomes infinitely more transparent to everyone, but at the same time, it becomes infinitely more off-grid as well, especially at a regulatory level. So the data is there. I was talking about transaction monitoring a while ago. This is something that is now just open to everyone, right, in this case. And we're seeing the emergence of poker sites in this space as well, which, again, the anonymity opens the door to collusion, for example, to chip dumping, which then opens the door to money laundering in turn, which, going back to what we said about AI, I think means that becomes even more important, because there is just so much more data to analyze and so many more trends and patterns to look out for.
I mean, Sumsub is in the middle of all these things. It must be so exciting for you to be working at Sumsub, because all this is changing every single day, every single week. And you just have to catch up, as well as balance, as well as, cater towards regulators, cater towards players, cater towards operators, and take such a huge responsibility in a way.
I mean, I say it's exciting and I genuinely love it. But if you ask me when I've cancelled my third holiday of the year, it's a little bit different. But no, I mean, I'm joking. It's incredibly exciting. But especially, I think, in this industry. I mean, I'm solely responsible for iGaming, right? But obviously at Sumsub we work across a multitude of industries.
Oh, got it. Okay.
But just iGaming itself, again, we've spoken about layers before. It has so many layers to it, from the different types of licenses and operators to money laundering, to bonus abuse, to identity fraud, and then affiliate fraud comes in, and then that's another aspect as well. And then we're working with regulators and explaining how illicit operators will use deepfake videos of somebody like Mr. Beast or Kabe Lame to persuade viewers of Reels on Instagram or Shorts on YouTube that those people are creating their own casino to genuinely give back to their community, because they persuade them that they'll win however many thousands of dollars every day, and then that takes you to the App Store, and then the App Store app is a phishing game, and you look at it and go, this is weird, why is Mr. Beast launching a phishing game? And then you download it and you open it and it's a casino, and then it becomes obvious that the only reason it was a phishing game was to get past the Apple review at the time, and it's so
complex.
Absolutely, So it's fun. it's a fun may not be the right word, but it's certainly an exciting and ever-changing industry to work in. And to think that even if just in a little way, I can combat this and use my skills and experience for good is motivating.
So inspiring, actually. And we're talking about iGaming, and some people say that the thing that right now is very, very popular, prediction markets, is not regulated right now, and it's not a part of iGaming officially. What do you think? Is it gambling or not, and how it should be regulated as the iGaming industry, or it needs a little bit different regulations?
It's a really interesting topic. Did you hear the story about the guy who placed a $30,000 prediction on
Tell
Maduro
us more.
Just before.
What did he place on?
On Maduro. Being,
okay.
I don't know what the politically correct term is. Kidnapped.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the politically correct term, but on essentially Trump moving into Venezuela and taking Maduro.
Oh wow!
And there was somebody who placed a prediction for $30,000 that this would happen shortly before it actually did happen.
Oh wow!
That's crazy.
Won $400,000 on this.
What?
I think it was Polymarket, who then refused to pay out. And it was later discovered. I don't think it was private. I think it became public knowledge that some media outlets, such as the New York Times, had the advanced information that this was going to happen before it did happen. So with predictions, I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for insider trading, or the equivalent of insider trading in this space. So how you regulate that becomes increasingly difficult, because if you look to exclude anybody who could possibly have insider information, I mean, how would you even go about identifying
Who
all
is
of those individuals?
So isn't it same like stock market in a way?
I think within the stock market, you kind of know how people are positioned a little bit better. I mean, I'm far from an expert, but you understand whether or not somebody, or it's easy to know whether or not somebody would have insider information, because you're in the stock
You're in a
market,
company
right?
or not, kind of.
And also, you know what the castigation is going to be if you're caught doing that. It's a very mature industry in that sense. Whereas, I mean, you're either a trader or you're not a trader. I think in a lot of senses. Obviously, there's the recreational isn't the right word, but there's the less serious side of it. I think in the prediction market, you could be,
there is no entity.
you could be the son of the brother of the neighbor of the referee, right? Something like this, and you could get that knowledge. So I think it becomes incredibly difficult to regulate and even to monitor. Now, at the same time, it's fun. And we were talking earlier about that element of fun lacking in the more traditional iGaming space. And, fun, I think, is captured in the sense of Plinko and Hilo, like we were talking about before. Fun is these conveyor belt fruit races that we see. And fun is also prediction markets.
All that is fine, but anything involving crime or there has to be a line that we need to draw, right?
Yeah. But I suppose with anything that's new and innovative, we talked about the arms race within AI. I think there's an arms race in anything that's innovative until it reaches the point of maturity where you understand what the
bad things are,
what the motivations are for the different players in it, whether they're bad actors or whether they're the anti-fraud teams.
So are you saying that prediction markets is gambling? Because according to the data, 90% of contracts on Polymarket are sports contracts.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize. But overall, even without that knowledge, I would have still said it was gambling, right? And certainly,
is it easier to just classify it as gambling, so we have already rules in place, and we'll save a lot of resources for regulators?
No, because even just because it's gambling, that doesn't mean the same rule set applies to it, right? If we're talking about the differences between bingo and poker and sportsbook, and we have different rules that apply to some of those verticals. But then lottery is another great example, right? Lottery is typically regulated differently to how casinos are operated. Now, you might say, well, lottery has instant win games and casinos have lottery games, but the way that they're done is very different, right? Just the frequency of a national regulated lottery is very, very different to the frequency of a lottery on a casino. So naturally they're regulated differently. So I don't think it's a case of just saying, well, this is gambling, so it should fall under the same regulation. I think it's a case of saying, yes, this is gambling in the sense that you're placing a wager on an unknown outcome, but it doesn't necessarily mean it should follow the same regulation as blackjack, for example.
So in that sense, where is US going? Because that's where all eyes are on when it comes to prediction markets. We see that Tennessee has been moving really quickly in terms of dealing with what's going on. So what do you think personally? How would this evolve into being regulated in the United States or other markets?
Tough question. I mean, the US is just generally a mixed bag in so many ways, right? Was it Indiana that recently came out and said sweepstakes is absolutely within the law, right? It's like we're not going to do anything about this because they're not violating any of the regulation. They're not saying that they back it, but they're kind of saying, this is what it is.
I mean, it is United States of America, but it does seem like in this case it's divided States of America, because every state can do whatever they want in a way, right?
Controversial statement. When you were saying that, I was thinking fragmented States of America, and then you just dropped that bomb. So, absolutely. But I mean, I think a lot of people would probably say that's the beauty of it, right? Is that individual independence at a state level. But then the way it's done, it like I said, it's a very mixed bag. There are some states where it's very where you can open a casino or sweepstakes platform or an operator, a sportsbook, and get a license fairly easily. There are others that essentially make it prohibitive unless you're one of the big players and you've got 12, 13, 14, 15 million dollars to put into it from the get-go. So it varies massively in terms of the sweepstakes market. I think it's interesting because it's, by the very definition of what it does, it needs to be trustworthy. If you're placing a bet on something which is very random and which is, by definition, just unpredictable, not in the sense of the outcome, but unpredictable in the sense of the event itself. Am I going to get paid out on this? What are the terms going to be? The platform needs to be trustworthy, right? It needs to show that it's fair with the users. You don't want to place a bet on a completely random event for them to turn around and go, oh no, but because of this one little factor, we're not going to pay you out because we didn't mean that, we meant this. So from that perspective, you need to be able to trust what's happening and trust that you're going to get paid out and trust that they're going to honor the nature of the wager. But at the same time, from the other side, they need to be very careful in what they pay out and who they pay out, just because of the very nature of that insider information and what might somebody know.
It's so complicated.
Yeah,
Do you think this is the start of responsible predicting space, which can be part of ensuring that the predictors get paid, as well as there is some sort of lines, just as we have in responsible gaming?
Interesting question. I'm not sure, and I wonder what metrics could be in place to create a very fair environment. Because, I mean, ultimately, it's a popular pastime, let's say, and there are going to be lots of very well-meaning providers who want to be fair with their users. So, I wonder what you could do in terms of visibility and transparency to bridge the gap where it's a win-win for both sides. So could that be an AI platform that gives you examples of circumstances in which they would pay out versus wouldn't pay out? Is it a blockchain thing where you look at previous payouts and what's been? I'm not sure, but there needs to be, I think, some sort of a neutral middleman, whether that's a feature, whether it's AI, whatever it is, to really regulate that at a moral level and at a transparency level, if not a government one.
Feels an exciting industry, just evolving. So we'll see what will come here.
Yeah, it's scary and very exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
Cool. That's pretty much it, Kris, for today. Thank you for joining us on this insightful as well as interesting conversation. I think there's a lot of things that we could touch upon, as well as maybe come back later on for a follow-up conversation
I'd love to.
as it evolves, and as you're working towards raising awareness as well as doing the best for each of the stakeholders in this area. So thank you again for joining us, and this is My Gaming License podcast from Barcelona.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kris.
Powered by My Gaming License.